Okay. Um, Good evening, everyone, once again. Welcome to tonight's class. The class is going to be brief. It will not be taking much time because time is already gone. So, our topic for tonight is going to be fiscal federalism. And my plan is that after we take fiscal federalism, if we are able to finish it very quickly, we can as well touch one other topic. But I don't know, because of the time now, if we'll be able to do that. But at least we'll be able to talk about fiscal federalism very well tonight. Okay, let me quickly share the YouTube link for the benefit of people that would prefer to join YouTube. Okay. I think I saw somebody was raising hand earlier. Okay, maybe it was a mistake. So let me also share this. This. Right.
The network is bad here.
Okay, kindly confirm.
We cannot hear you.
Hello, can you hear me clearly?
Hello, sir. We cannot
Hello.
hear you. The network is breaking.
Oh. Network.
But I can hear you very well.
And I can't view the screen for what you were sharing. I can't view it.
Okay, I've changed my positioning, so I believe it should be better now.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, but this screen doesn't seem it's showing. Let me reshare it. Okay, good. So I believe the screen is also is not showing now.
We
Yes,
can't
sir.
hear
Yes, sir, we can see your screen now.
Okay, good. So like I, s- like I said earlier, we'll be discussing about fiscal federalism tonight, and I want to believe that my distinguished colleague, that one of my colleagues must have taken you through public finance in one of the earlier classes, and so we'll be making reference to some of the points from public finance in this uh, discussion as well. So when we want to discuss this, we need to first understand. Please, let's everybody put up their microphone, please. Let us all put up our microphones, please. Thank you. So we need to understand the concept of a federation before we can, you know, very well talk about fiscal federalism. So the concept of federation, we need to understand it very well. So when we talk about a federation, we are referring to, oh God, please, all microphones off, please. All microphones should be off. All microphones should be off. Joy, please put off your microphone. Thank you. So when we talk about a federation, we are referring to an entity that comprises of the national government and other components, other sub-components of governance. Okay, so that is what a federation means. That is, we are a situation where we have a national government, and then we have other governments that are sub-national, taking care of the grassroots. So that is how a federation looks like. So in the case of Nigeria, we have a national government known as the federal government, and then we have the state government, a situation where the country is divided into 36, or let's say 37 parts. So each one governed by a state government. And then each of these states are also subdivided into what is known as local governments. So these three tiers of government makes up what is known as the Nigerian Federation. Okay, so when we now talk about fiscal federalism, I think I mentioned it earlier in my previous classes that when anywhere you see fiscal, they are referring to financial, something financial is happening there. When you see fiscal, it's referring to financial. So fiscal federalism simply means how the uh, the finances of a federation are being shared, are being uh, allocated into the different tiers of government. All right. So properly put in a proper definition is the relationship, the financial relationship that happens between the different governments of the country that is already provided for in the constitution of the country. So this relationship states the different responsibility, different financial responsibilities of the different levels of government. All right. And the entitlement, the resources that are entitled to each one of them, how resources have to be allocated between the different tiers of government and the responsibilities that each tier of government is expected to take with those resources that are given to them. Okay, so fiscal federalism specify the functions that need to be performed by each tier of government. And it also provides for the financial resources that will be used for those functions as well, that they will use in doing the public goods and services. Okay, so quickly referring to what you must have learned in public finance, I believe we all know what public goods are. Okay, do we know what public goods are? Can somebody quickly tell us what are public goods?
Public goods are goods that are made like available to the general public, that the whole of the general public can have access to it.
Okay,
Just like
good,
of road.
good, good. Hmm. Some people have read very well. So, can you remind us the two most important characteristics of public goods? Those two characteristics that distinguish public goods very well. That their consumption is non-rival, and the fact that they are,
Non-excludability.
thank you, Precious, non-excludability and non-rival consumption. So meaning that the consumption that the consumption and non-rival means that one person is consuming it does not stop another person from being able to consume the same public good. So if you have street lights in a particular area, the fact that I am enjoying the street light does not stop you as well from enjoying the same street lights. Okay, and non-excludability means that the services, the goods are provided to everybody. It is not separated that, okay, these are the set of people that these services are meant for, that these benefits are meant for. So they don't, public goods don't say that because they are provided with taxpayers' money, so it is only people that pay tax that will use the bridge, or it's only people that pay tax that will enjoy street lights. So even though it is made with taxpayers' money, it should be provided and then everybody will enjoy it. That's non-excludability. Okay. So coming back to our discussion now. So the fiscal federalism will talk about the different tiers of government that will take responsibility for different public goods in the economy, in the federation. Okay. So, and this fiscal federalism is, so in summary, is broadly concerned with how revenue are shared among the different levels of government, and then how expenditure responsibilities are also shared among the different tiers of government. So the bulk of this discussion about how revenues are shared must have been discussed in another topic as well. That is sources of government revenue. I believe if that topic has been taken, and that's where the more discussions on how government revenue are being allocated, the revenue sharing formulas, where you talk about the federation accounts, how they share to the different levels of government and all of that. So here we'll discuss more about the expenditure assignment, that is the functions, the responsibilities that are assigned to the different tiers of government and how are they assigned. So let's talk about expenditure assignments. Expenditure assignments means the division or sharing of expenditure or tax responsibilities or regulatory responsibilities among the different tiers of government or different levels of government. And what it means is that there are some responsibilities that the federal government takes wholly as its own responsibility. There are some responsibilities that the federal government will leave to the subnational governments, the state and local governments to take care of. There are some that all of them are doing it together. Okay, so those are the issues that we'll be looking at. So in the sharing of all these responsibilities, the idea of how these responsibilities are shared are usually guided by certain principles. So the principles of expenditure assignment. So what are the principles that they use to determine which level of government will take one responsibility or the other? So efficient provision of public services is one important principle that need to be considered. That is, these public services that need to be provided. There are some services that require adequate efficiency for them to reach the people. Okay, so how efficient, the level of efficiency that is required in provision of a particular service will probably lead, probably guide the government on which level of government they will assign that responsibility to.
So we cannot see your screen now.
Somebody is saying my screen is not showing. I think people have confirmed that it's showing before. So
We can
maybe
see it.
maybe the network error is from your side. Okay, nobody is seeing my screen.
I can
We
see
can
your
see
screen.
it,
We
sir.
can see.
Yeah, it's showing. Maybe that responsibility will be assigned to. So, for example, those responsibilities that need to reach the grassroots, that need to reach the people. If government wants some services to reach the people at the grassroots, they have to assign those responsibility to the local government. So, take for example the issue of primary health care. So, because primary health care needs to reach people at the grassroots, needs to reach everybody, especially people in uh, the rural areas, the grassroots areas. So the government assigns the responsibility of primary health care to the local governments to take care of, in state government, so that these services can reach the people at the grassroots efficiently, to reach everybody equally, at least with some level of equity in reaching the entire country. Those kind of services will not be left for subnational governments, because of course we know that um, Lagos State will not have the power to determine how much of those kind of service will be enjoyed by Akwa Ibom State, or Enugu State cannot determine how much of a service will be enjoyed by Sokoto State. So because of that, the federal government will centralize the provision of such services so that they can be able to equally share it around based on level of equity that is required. So if you look at the services of maybe social welfare, for example, when the government wanted to do what do they call this program that Empower, the federal government was the one handling it. So they only created offices around the states so that they can be able to manage the program very well. But it was a federal government program managing it right there from Abuja so that they can know that it will reach everybody, it will reach every part of the country. Also, efficient provision of quasi public goods is also one of the principles that is being used to determine which level of government will take up which responsibility. When we say when we talk about quasi-public goods, we have different, like three forms of public goods. We have the pure public goods, there is the quasi-public goods, there is the merit goods. Okay, so the quasi-public goods, the pure public goods are purely goods or services that are provided purely by the government. They are the ones that have those exclusive characteristics of non-excludability, non what's it called? Uh, so they are the ones that have those exclusive characteristics of public goods. The quasi-public goods are those goods that both the government and the private sector provide them. Okay, so think of roads, think of maybe some level of education. So these are quasi-public goods that the government is providing it. The private sector is also going into some part of it to to certain level. Then the merit goods are those ones that are goods of necessity that people should not be denied from it because of their level, because if, because they cannot pay, or because of any, for no reason, people should not be denied from it. Those are merit goods like healthcare. So now, for quasi-public goods to be efficiently provided, it needs it. This is one of the principles that will guide expenditure assignment. So it needs to be handled by the national government. The national government must, they will always want to be involved in quasi-public goods, because these are goods that private sector is also providing, so that private sector will not hijack those kind of sectors and then begin to exploit the people. So the central government will want to go into it. So those are the principles that guide how governments actually assign these responsibilities to different levels of government. I don't know if you have heard about something that is known as government exclusive legislative list and concurrent legislative list. Okay, it is one uh, concept that is in the constitution, that there are some responsibilities that are exclusively for federal government to take care of. And then there are concurrent legislative list, means that those items that both the federal government and the subnational government can do the exclusive means that it's only federal government that can do it, that can handle such matters, like the issue of defense. So you know that it's federal government that handles defense, army, navy, air force, police. Is federal government's responsibility. It's exclusively for federal government. Okay. So other matters like like education is concurrent, that is federal government can do, subnational government can also do as well. So it is this principle that guides government on how to assign certain responsibility to, whether it should be an exclusive item or it should be a concurrent item. Okay. Now, issues of economic stabilization as well is also one of the principles that guide how responsibilities are being assigned. Responsibilities that has to do with economic stabilization cannot be left for the lower level of governments, because economic stabilization have to affect the whole country as a whole. So it is the national government that will handle economic stabilization matters. So you think of issues like exchange rates issues, think of issues like inflation rate issues, interest rates, and so on like that, price stabilization. It is the national government that will handle all those kind of issues. So those are the principles that guide government on how to decide which level of government should take which responsibility. All right. So also preservation of a common market. So it's also similar to that. For us, for the country to be a common market, a single market, in the country, issues that will affect market market trend, that will affect the market efficiency, will have to be handled by the federal government. So, like those examples I gave before. So, we cannot, the government cannot say every government, whether state and local, should begin to have their own legislation or policy on interest rates, for example. So, which means that if you want to get a loan in Lagos State, they will give you a different interest rate. So, if you want to get a loan in Abia State, they will give you a different interest rate. If you go to Borno State, they give you a different interest rate. So that will not make the country a common market. Okay, so for us to have a common market, issues that will affect the general market efficiency will have to be handled by the national government. Okay, so that's about that. So we'll also quickly look at the arguments in favor of both centralization. So because if you look at all this issue now, we are talking about centralization and decentralization of responsibility. That is, there are some responsibilities that are being centralized for the central government, for the national government to handle. There are some responsibilities that are being decentralized, where the national government may leave it to the lower level of government to handle, or they handle it together and so on. So what are the advantages? I mean, what are the reasons why we should have centralization, and what are the reasons why we should have decentralization? So is what we'll look at next very quickly. So for decentralization, the argument in favor of decentralization is that for some services that need to be close to the people, for services to be close to the people, they need to be handled by the local government. And the local government is closer to the people, and they know the needs, they understand the needs of the people more. So this argument is saying that expenditure responsibilities should be decentralized, so that the local government, the lower level of government, who knows the need of the people, should be the one to be taking care of expenditure responsibilities. Right? Decentralization also needs unnecessary level of responsibility assignment. That is where you have to, go through different levels of authorization before a particular responsibility of government is done. Is decentralization will eliminate all of that. So let's take, for example, there are some roads in different states of the country that will say some roads are federal roads. So even if the road is getting really, really damaged, the state government might decide not to touch it. Local government too will be looking at it. They will say it's federal roads. And if federal government wants to do it, it have to come from Abuja. They have to do also a lot of processing before it gets there. Apart from that, there are some other issues that maybe the local government and the federal government work together to do. So let's look at the issue of primary health care that we mentioned the other time. So for the primary health care, is federal government that is funding those responsibilities, but it is the local government that are implementing it. So for those responsibilities to be done, the federal government have to send money, they have to do for local government to be able to handle those responsibilities, they have to go to Abuja, get some level of authorization up to the state level, and then before it gets to the local government. But if this responsibility is completely decentralized, and every local government are even allowed to even do whatever they like with their primary health centers, just have the funding, handle it the way you like. So that's the argument, one of the arguments for decentralization, that it will eliminate different or going through different levels of authorization for government responsibilities to be done. Then there's also healthy competition between the different subnational governments. So that is, if responsibilities are decentralized to the different levels of government, government will begin to compete with development amongst themselves. So one state will begin to look at another state and say, we want to beat them, we want to uh, outperform this state. One local government will try to outperform another one. And of course, this will eventually result in even development. That is, everywhere will be developed because every local government wants their own to be the best. Then local authorities as well can also respond to the demands of the people. If government responsibilities are decentralized, the needs of the people in the local area can easily be responded to by the local government uh, authority instead of waiting until the federal government will notice that those challenges. So the moment the people need something, they can easily assess the local authority and say, this is what we need. And then the local authorities can quickly respond as well that, okay, my people need this. Okay. But as for centralization as well, there is also some responsibilities that needs to be centralized. And there are some arguments for having centralized responsibilities, fiscal responsibilities in some areas. All right. So some areas require large amounts of money, large resources to handle. And the local government may not have those resources to handle those responsibilities efficiently. They may be able to do some things, but they may not be able to afford the level of funding that is required to efficiently handle those kind of responsibilities. So those kind of responsibilities are better left for the central government to be done. Also, public goods that are of national benefits or the ones that foreigners also needs to benefit are better to be left for the national government to handle, so that the benefit will reach everybody. So if it's something that the whole nation needs to benefit from it, then it's better to be centralized. Because if it is left for for the subnational government, we have a situation where one state is not performing very well in that area, and then what it means is that people that state will not service. Okay, certain responsibilities are left for the national government to handle. It will reduce the cost of bureaucracy or administering from different parts of the country. Okay, then we also need to look at the problems that face expenditure assignments. Okay, once again, expenditure assignment is referring to how different responsibilities are being assigned to different levels of government. Okay, so what are the problems that government face when handling expenditure assignment, when sharing responsibilities? Now, sometimes co-sharing of responsibilities can lead responsibility being handled by different levels of government may cause confusion. Let's give a typical example. Education. We know that, as I mentioned earlier, that basic education is the responsibility of local governments. At the same time, we know that education policies usually come from the federal government. It's the federal government that comes up with the curriculum, come up with the educational structure. It is the federal government that will tell us that it is 6334 that we are using. Meanwhile, it is the state and local governments that are handling the the infrastructural aspect of education, funding the schools, building schools, paying teachers, and all of that. But it is federal government that is giving out instruction on how to run the schools, or how to on the structure that they should run. So this sometimes lead to confusion because there are some things that some levels of government want to do to improve the level of education in their state, but they can't do because education policy comes from federal government. Okay, so with that we can't clearly say that this is the level of government that is handling education in the country. Another problem is the ambiguity in certain services, in certain assignments. All right. So certain assignments are not clearly given to some uh, to some level of government. All right. They are not clearly assigned to some level of government. So they're ambiguous, like the example of education that we gave the other time, the issue of roads, where you have some roads are federal roads, some roads are state roads, some roads are local government roads. These are problems that lead to inefficient assignment as well. Okay, so we have inefficient assignment, that is a situation where a particular responsibility is assigned to one level of government, and that level of government is not handling that responsibility efficiently. Okay, so there are tons of, a number of roads across the country now where they will say it is federal road, and they are damaged, they are causing danger to lives of people, but the government of that particular area, local government, state government, they are not doing anything to it. They say it's federal road, especially where there's political differences between the federal government and the government of that state. They will say it's federal road, they will not do it. Federal government on its own part too is leaving the road undone. It's causing problem for people. So those are some of the problems that comes with expenditure, really or formally level of government. So let's look at the issue of social security or social welfare, for example. So there is no formal assignment of social welfare of the people. So any particular tier of government. So any tier of government that wants to do is just doing. And if they don't do, nobody is calling them to, is holding them to the responsibility that this is the responsibility of your government to do this and do this. All right. Like in social welfare or social security. Okay. So the solutions to these problems are that there needs to be minimum standards. So if responsibility is assigned to a particular tier of government, there needs to be laws that will establish minimum standards of performance that those level of governments are expected to do. So if you say that local government should handle primary health care, there should be a law that will state the minimum standard of the minimum amount of fund that each local government is expected to spend on their primary health centers every year, or the minimum level of facilities that they are expected to provide for each of these primary health centers every year. Because if you look at the primary, I don't know how primary health centers look like in some uh, some more urbanized states like maybe Lagos or Abuja or Enugu. But if you look at most of the states that we have in Nigeria, the primary health centers, especially those ones that are in the rural areas, they are in terrible states, terrible conditions. That's even sometimes when you look at the news and then there are news reports about some primary health centers or hospitals, local hospitals in some state, you begin to wonder if this place is even meant for human beings. Right? So those are problems of inefficient assignments. Okay, so assignment is assigned assigned the responsibilities assigned to local government to take care of primary health centers, but they're not doing it efficiently. So if there is a minimum standard that is set by law, it will prevent that non-performance. Okay, so there also needs to be reassignment of certain expenditures. So some expenditures need to be reassigned. That okay, if we observe that this assignment is meant for this responsibility is meant for a particular tier of government, and they are not performing very well at it, then the government should be flexible enough to reassign and say, okay, instead of having so many roads that are undone across the country, why don't federal government just give all roads, remove their hands from all roads, and let all the funding that they give to Ministry of Works that's constructing roads every time, let all the funding go to the states so that the state can, construct their own roads by themselves, or any other area like that. That's just an example. So establishment of formal assignments is also important to solve the problem of expenditure assignment. That is, some areas that are not formally assigned to certain tier of government should be properly assigned by law, so that every tier of government will know that it is their responsibility to do certain responsibilities, certain expenditure or assignments. So that is about expenditure assignments. And quickly before we go on that part, we'll also quickly talk about grants, intergovernmental transfers, which is known as grants. That is when a government makes transfer to another government. That's what is known as intergovernmental transfers. So, and it comes in form of aids and grants. That is, the federal government can give grants to local government and state government. The state government as well can give grants to local government. Okay, and grants can be in two forms. Grant can be a general purpose grant, and it can be a specific purpose grant. When it's general purpose, it means that the beneficiary of the grant can use the fund for a general budget support. That is, they can use it for whatever they want that is in their budget, and use it to fund it. So if federal government gives a general purpose grant to one local government now, so the local government can decide that, okay, what expenditures are in our budgets that we have been unable to fund. We just use the money to fund it. Okay, is it provision of okay, we have a program in our budget that we want to do empowerment and buy motorbikes and a grinding machine for some indigent people. Okay, let's use this money for it. Or even if they say we want to buy uh, if it is just to give palliative to people, whatever they want to use it for, they are free to use a general purpose grant for it. But specific purpose grants are usually given for, as the name implies, for specific purpose. And that grant is expected to be utilized for that purpose for which it is given. Okay. So in that case, the government can give a grant to a particular state and say, we want you to use this grant for renovation of hospitals. So what it means is that they cannot use that money for any other thing except renovation of hospital. So the state government can give grants to local government and say, we want
Sir,
to
please,
use
we
this
cannot
grant
hear you. Your voice
for
is not loud.
my voice is not loud. Why is nobody
Check your
complaining
network.
since?
We can hear
Sir,
you,
we
Your
cannot
please.
hear
network.
you. Your voice is not
His
loud.
network. Your network. His voice is
His
very
voice
clear.
is loud,
His
very
voice is
loud.
very loud.
Maybe it's your network.
I wanted to say, why didn't you complain since then? Hey, I, so thank God people say it's loud. Okay. So I was saying that the state government can give a grant to local government and say, okay, we want you to use this grant for renovation of schools in your local government. And so they will use that fund majorly only for innovation. So that's a specific purpose grant. So specific purpose grants may also come in different forms. It can be a conditional one, it can be an unconditional grant. Okay, so when it's conditional, it means that you cannot get the grant except you fulfill certain conditions. Sometimes it may be a, a counterpart funding. If you look at these SDGs programs, for example, the federal government funds SDG programs in different states, but usually they are on counterpart funding. That is, the state is expected to provide a certain percentage of the fund that is required for a certain project. So if a state says, okay, we have a challenge that is one of the goals of SDG that we want to fulfill in our state, maybe let's say provision of water for a particular community, and we want to solve this problem. So the state will do a proposal for that project and cost the project. Let's say the project is supposed to cost 5 million, or let's say the project is supposed to cost 200 million. Now, a certain percentage of that 200 million will have to be provided by the state. So that is the condition before the federal government will now give the complete fund, so the complete grants. So complete that 200 million. So if it is 50-50, for example, what it means is that the state have to find 100 million, fund an account that is open for that project with 100 million. So when the federal government, through the office of the SDG at the federal level, sees that, okay, they have funded their account with 100 million out of the 200 million needed, then they will now complete the money for them. So that's a form of conditional grants. Some conditional grants are not counterpart funding as well. It just means that they need to fulfill certain conditions before they can give them the grants. Okay. There's a program by the, I think it's an international program, maybe from the World Bank or something like that. So after the class, you guys can read a little about SIFTAS, SFTAS. It's an acronym, State Financial. I can't remember the full name. It's SFTAS. You can note it down. Just Google about it later and read about them. So what they do is that they encourage state governments in public finance and accountability, transparency and accountability. That's what they try to do. They try to encourage state governments in preparing their budgets properly, in preparing their financial report properly, and all of that. So they give grants to states that are able to complete certain tasks before some deadlines that are given. They will give deadlines and say, okay, if you are able to pass your budget before 31st December, if you are able to publish your financial statement before maybe 30th of March, if you are able to publish one thing, if you are able to do this, that. So those states that are able to fulfill those conditions, they will give them certain grants that they will collect for free. So those are conditional grants. So what it means is just that the beneficiary have to fulfill certain conditions before they can get the grant. But if it is unconditional, it means they just get it. They don't, no condition is attached. All right. So in giving grants, let's quickly look at the guidelines that usually followed before grants are given. Now, the clarity of grant objective is very important. That is, the objective of the person giving the grant, that is the entity that is giving the grant, whether it's federal government that is giving to states or state that is giving to local government or even a multilateral organization that is giving it. There has to be clarity in the objective of that grant. Okay, this grant is meant to achieve renovation of primary health centers across the states. So that the recipients will know what they are supposed to do with that grant, and they know the objective of the person that is giving the grant, and they, of course, they will utilize that grant tailored towards achieving the objective of the grantor. Okay. Autonomy also is one of the guidelines that is followed in grants. That is, the recipient that is receiving the grant should be given freedom to use it. Not that it is the person that is giving the grant that will still be the one to come and be implementing the project. So if you give a grant to a particular state to renovate their schools, okay, renovate your secondary schools with this money, the grantor, the one giving the grant, whether it is federal government that is giving the grant, it is not the entity that's giving the grant that will still come and bring people that will come and be implementing the project. No. The only thing is that they will monitor the implementation, but there has to be autonomy for the government entity that is receiving the grant to be able to operate on their own. Then revenue adequacy also is also looked at. That is, the amount of money you are giving should be adequate enough to cover the project that the grant is targeting. Responsiveness, that is, the grant program should be flexible enough to accommodate changes as a result of unforeseen circumstances. So in the fiscal condition. So if you give grants to a particular recipient, maybe local government, and that grant is supposed to cater for a particular project, it's possible that the indices that will, the inputs that they will put into the project may change as a result of circumstances beyond their control. So grants are expected to be designed in such a way that it can accommodate changes in the cost structure and some other things. Then equity is one other guidelines in grant design. That is, funds should be allocated. Funds allocated should vary directly with the fiscal needs of the people that the government that is giving the grants. Okay, so if we say that we want to give grants to all, let's say a particular state have 16 local governments, and then the state government want to give grants to each local government. So it's not expected that you now say, okay, you are giving each local government 10 billion, because the need of the different local governments will be different. So the best way is to do a need assessment, know the level of need of each local government, and then give them the grants according to their level of need. It's possible that a particular local government may need for the achievement of that objective, for which you are giving grants, a local government may need up to 20 billion. Meanwhile, there may be a particular local government that doesn't need more than 2 billion to cater for the whole thing, the same thing in their own local government. So equity in grants does not mean that you should give each recipient the same amount, but according to their needs. Then predictability, that is, grants should be predictable. The recipients of grants should be able to predict from financial information of the grantor whether they are going to get grants from there or not. So from the budget of the federal government, for example, every year, it should have shown the provisions they have for grants every year, so that any state or local government that want to apply for grants from there, we already, like the example of SDG that I gave the other time, the budget of SDG in a particular year would have shown that this is the amount that is available that they want to spend in giving grants. So it is it's easy for different states to be able to predict and say, okay, out of this money, let's apply for this from the federal government. Then the grant process needs to be transparent. Transparency is very, very important. Efficiency, that is, all the activities must be done up to in time, at reasonable costs, and all of that. Incentive, so there should be incentive for the good performance. So if you give grants to a particular recipient and they performed well with the implementation of that grant, there should be an incentive that will even follow for such recipients. Then accountability for results, that is report giving. In grant design, reporting is very, very important. In fact, the reporting is as important as the implementation of the project. If a particular government receives grants, whether local government or state government, if they receive a grant and they implement the grants very well, the projects that the grant is meant for, if they implement it very well, in fact, they spend all the money judiciously, but they are not giving reports, they will have problem. In future grants, the organization that is giving them the grant will not want to give them grant anymore because they are not giving reports. Because if they are not giving reports, like we said earlier, that they should have autonomy to operate. So it is not that organization that is implementing for you. You are the one that is implementing. If you are not giving reports, they will not know how much you are doing. Okay, so especially those international organizations like the World Bank. I know some of us here that may be working for some organizations that have access to maybe World Bank grant, United Nations grant, and all of that. You know the importance they attach to accountability, that is giving reports on the projects you implement. In fact, it's more important to them than what the thing you are implementing itself. So if you are implementing, you might be implementing the best project, but if you are not giving reports, you will have problem. So one of the important guidelines in grant design is accountability, that is giving reports. So that's about fiscal, the module we take about fiscal federalism. And I think am able to fish out a few past question reference that we can check out and see how questions might come in that area. Okay, so if you have any question, you can come up with it. Any question? Okay, so in the absence of question, maybe in, okay, this is 10:30. 10:30. Okay. In another 30 minutes, let's quickly look at, oh, we are already sleeping. Can we, should we quickly look at one other topic?
Hello, sir. So
Okay.
which language is
Yes,
good at one after the other? Because they not just prepare when they want the exam.
I can't hear you.
I said, when are we going to start dealing with those IPSAS? Because we have less than a month to the exam.
The IPSAS.
Like all
Mm,
those IPSAS.
okay. And about the IPSAS, the issue is the tutor that will take the part of the IPSAS has been very busy lately. I believe he's going to join he's going to come up with the classes on IPSAS very soon. So, but as for the IPSAS, the only thing I'm going to say, what I will say to that is that you guys should not um, stress yourself too much about IPSAS because there are plenty of them. And what we know, what we have seen from past experience is that they will not ask much of IPSAS. Sometimes they will ask one or two, which we are not even sure which one or two they will pick. They don't have a trend of how they ask for it, how they test IPSAS. Unlike maybe in FR, where you can easily predict their trend of IAS or IFRS that they ask. It's not like that in IPSAS. They don't have a trend from past experience. So it's important that you don't stress yourself too much on it. If you can, I mean, use your energy more on the other part. However, we will still come up with a few IPSAS before the end of the lectures that will bring up. Okay.
Sorry to because without no appreciation. What I want to avoid justify because some of us already know that I'm paper and sincerely people is so bulky. And now there is a lot of people are referring to that because of the bulkiness of it. So 85% of the time you can't even cover up the July of with the fact that most of us are also working. So how would you predict you go about reading it it
To be honest, when it comes, like I said earlier, when it comes to IPSAS, it's very difficult to predict
no,
where.
not it in general.
Okay, PSAF in general.
It's like it in
Well,
general.
well, what I can say is just read as much as you can of the syllabus, as much as you can, as much as you can hold. Read as much as you can hold of the syllabus. The syllabus is bulky, and
Yeah.
they really do not have a trend. That's one of the things that makes it, somehow that make the course somehow. They don't really have a trend of how their question, how the topics they usually test. Except from some topics that that usually they will come from those areas like public finance, public debt, and all of that. Maybe budgeting. eh. So even preparation of financial statements, it's not every year that they test preparation of financial statements. It's not every year they test. There may be some guys that they don't even test IPSAS at all. So they don't have a trend. So the thing is just read as much of it as you can, and then more importantly, try to understand the concepts more rather than just cramming the topics. Understand the concept. There are sometimes you will not even read one topic. Maybe you don't read the topic, but because you read another topic that is related to it, you can use, that you understand that topic very well. You can use the knowledge of that topic to actually treat the questions that will come on another topic. Okay, some of these topics are, interrelated like that. So those topics that you read, that you're able to read, understand them very well. Understand the concepts very well. That's why in all of our classes we try to explain very well for you to understand the idea behind the topic, the concept very well, so that you can even use the knowledge to handle another topic or another question from another topic when they come. So there is no way to predict. Just as much as where you can read them. But from the structure of the syllabus, they have structured this in such a way that you can actually guess that, okay, questions will usually come from part D of the syllabus, which is public finance. That area where you have public expenditure, public debt, public revenue, those areas, fiscal federalism. But even that area that I'm talking about now have about seven chapters or 8 chapters. And now it may not be more than 2 questions that will come from there. So is that one too, we can't call it even prediction. All right. So the same way budgeting. So budgeting as well is one part of the syllabus on its own. It's like 1/4, 1/5 of the syllabus on its own. Budgeting and budgetary control. So usually they usually bring question from budgeting as well. So if you know those topics very well, Then the introductory part, know it very well. That because that introductory part, you see that introductory part of the syllabus, those from around chapter 1 to maybe chapter 10, around those areas, they are like summary of some other topics later in the syllabus. So if you understand those areas very well, very, very well, if they bring question from a part from another topic that you don't even read, you can still be able to, paraphrase something and write. Okay. So that will still bring me back to the earlier point that I said that those topics that you are able to read, make sure you understand them very well. Mhm. So that's just it.
John,
Okay.
Hello, sir.
All right, I'm with you.
You said that the IPSAS that we cannot predict it, but the FR, the all the IAS and all of that, you said you can still predict it. That this is what they will set also.
Mm.
So ever predict it?
CFR or Psaf.
FR.
please.
I don't take FR. I don't tutor FR. I don't
I
tutor
know.
FR,
And I
so I
wanted
can't
to say,
predict.
I wanted even to say that you are sounding like one of our tutor. Like it's been long. I used to notice this. So I think now that well, I yes, sir.
Eh,
Mr. Blouses. Ajoken.
Yeah, please,
okay,
presentation.
okay. So I can't predict FR because I don't tutor FR. I just because I have, of course, I've written FR2 before, so I know the nature of FR. I know how it looks like. If you have Mr. Kabir's past question summary on FR, you understand what I'm saying. That there are some there are some topics that you know that they usually bring. FR now you can know that consolidation is almost like 90% sure, even though some years they may misbehave. I can misbehave in some diets and not bring consolidation, but it's like 90% sure that consolidation will come. There are some certain standards that they are like 70-80% sure that they will come, IAS 16, IAS 36, so like that. So that's what I mean when I say you can predict the trend in FR a little bit, unlike
Yes.
Psaf. So it's not like I know how to predict. I have to predict the question that will come up.
So what did you call that past question? You mentioned you mentioned the material now. I said
It's a
it's
past question summary.
yeah.
Yeah, it's on all of our groups now. We usually share it in the groups. I expect everybody to have it so that because
So
it's
please
Oh,
very
could you
used.
please could you help us share for the courses, please?
Okay, I'll see if
Are
I
you
if I
talking about the guide or
yes,
what?
guide. Sorry, yeah, past question guide. That past question guide.
Yes.
okay,
Okay.
so
I
It's
think we
very
have that one.
everyone should have it.
We have
It's
that
it,
one. I think you're talking about
uh,
some
You're
question and
talking
answer.
about
so
something else like
no,
Summary.
that's past question guide that I'm talking about.
Okay.
Yeah. Mm.
all right, so
So
let's go to the next topic. Cool.
Uh, Hello, sir.
hello.
Yes, sir. Sorry, what about we that we are not in FR group, sir?
And join FR group now if you want to do. Are you doing FR?
I'm doing FR, but
And
I didn't
join the
see
group
the
now.
I didn't see the link for it.
Okay. And the groups that you had, you
Yes,
can
sir.
message. You can message any of the admins there. They will send you the link uh
For the,
for
okay,
the FR. Okay. So
oh,
let's quickly run through this other topic about emerging issues in public finance.
okay,
Okay. We'll just run through it. The note is very explanatory. You can read it up very well later. Okay, so the topic starts with the explanation of business cycle. That is how the economy runs in a cycle. Okay, and from expansion or prosperity, when we have an economy that is expanding, that is moving very fine, there's increase in economic factors, employment, output, everything, wage, companies are making profits, everything is moving well. Demand and supply will also be increasing because people are earning more income. They will demand more goods and services. And so if they demand more, it will force the company as well to expand and supply more. When they supply more, they sell more, they make more profits, they pay more taxes to government. Everything, everything goes very smoothly. And it continue like that until it reach a peak period where the increase in growth rates of business activity will reach a maximum point that the business, those activities will not grow again. Okay. And then it will now begin to have a reverse turn. Okay. So the economic factors will not increase again. The increase in prices of goods, there will be increase in prices of goods as a result of the increase in prices of inputs. Okay. Because the the workers are earning more, they want to earn more again. So because they want to earn more, the companies will have to increase prices as well. And then to get to a stage that the purchasing power of people will now begin to reduce because the prices are getting out of their level of income. So that's when recession will now begin to set in because what the monies they have can no longer afford the goods and services that are in place. So that's when a recession comes in, and then a recession can also lead to depression, which is as a result of now falling in price because people cannot afford the goods and services that companies are producing. The companies may decide to now start reducing prices so that people can afford it. Then companies will now start losing profits because they have to drop prices to be able to even make sales. Okay, and so it leads to a true phase. So in that true phase, economic activities of a country will now decline below normal level. That the growth rate of the economy will becomes negative. There will be rapid decline in income, and so then when it continues to decline, it will still decline to a level that it cannot decline further. It will now begin to pick up again. The economy will now begin to pick up again. That's known as the recovery stage. And then from recovery to get to prosperity again. That's how economic cycle moves. So then there's this part that is important as well, the public finance initiative, that is the public-private partnership ideas. So it's a situation where governments implement projects through partnership with the private sector. So we have different types of these initiatives. One of these is design build initiative. That is a situation where private sector partner will design and build infrastructure to meet the public sector's specification for a fixed price. All right. So in this case, it is the private sector that will assume the risk. That is, it is until they finish building that the public sector will now pay. Okay, so the government may want to construct a road now, and then they will ask the private sector entity to construct the road for them, the contractor to construct the road, and they will not pay until the road is fully completed, and then the government will now pay. So that's a form of is a way that governments use to finance their project. So in that case, they are able to get that project done without having to pay instantly for the projects to be done. So these are all these different initiatives are talking about how governments can actually achieve some projects without having to pay instantly or having to pay at all sometimes. So there's another way is to have an operation and maintenance. So in this case, the private sector partner, the company that partners with the government, will be the one to operate and maintain a publicly owned asset. So in this case, the government already own a particular asset, but they give it to a private sector uh, operator to operate and maintain it. Sometimes we call it concession or something like that. So where they will give it to a private sector company to be operating that particular asset and be maintaining it. They will only be giving returns, maybe on profits, some level of profits to the government. Then there's the design, build, finance, operate, and transfer. So in this case, the private sector company will be asked to design a project, they will build the project, they will finance the building of the project, they will operate the project for a certain number of years before they will now transfer it to government. So in that case, government is able to achieve that particular project without even spending any money at all. So probably it may only be the land that will belong to government, and then the private sector partner will construct the project, they will operate it. That is, usually this kind of initiatives are for projects that that require that the private sector entity will charge fees for running that those kind of projects. So look at it from maybe a recreational park. So government can ask the private sector entity to build a recreational park on government land. They'll build it, they'll finance the building and everything. They will operate it. So that is, they'll be the one to be running it. They'll be the one to be collecting revenue from operation of the park for an agreed number of years. So after the agreed number of years is complete, maybe it's 10 years, 15, 30 years, then they will transfer the project or the assets to government. And then they can also have the build, own, and operate. And this one, they will not transfer. The private sector entity will build and finance the assets, and then they will operate the assets. Okay, so this one is, I don't know, there are some schools, some universities use that kind of initiative to own hostels. A situation where the university may not be able to afford, building different hostels within the school. So they just ask the private sector to build hostel within the school and be operating the hostel. So in that case, that government entity, which is the university, the government university, is able to have a hostel building within their school without spending money, and the students will have access to hostels that will build, own, and operate. And then there's build, operate, and transfer. So the private sector partner is granted the authorization to finance a building, an infrastructure component for a specific period of time, and then they now transfer to the uh, government. Now, what are the advantages of this different finance initiative? It brings about efficiency, because we all know that a private sector operated assets is usually more efficiently managed than when government is operating the assets. So the advantage is that it brings about efficiency. The participation of private sector as well in project financing brings extra investment into the economy. So if government says private sector should come and handle a particular project, private sector will bring money and invest into that economy. So it improves production, it improves output, it grows the economy. The the private sector is also not paid until the asset is already completely delivered. So in that case, it encourages them to timely deliver the project. Who is raising hand?
Sir,
Mm.
the first one before the build own operate is a similar to build operate transfer to. So I don't know like it's
Which one are you talking about?
the operation and maintenance. That you said that they give them land and they will operate on it and later they will transfer it. And this one that you said build
Mm.
operate transfer, it's like it's the
Yes.
same thing. So it's confusing.
Uh, okay, okay, okay. You say the build, the design, build, operate, and transfer. That one is like a lease agreement. Okay, so the private sector will be the one to finance it. They will construct the assets. They will operate it under a lease agreement with the government. Okay, so after the lease agreement, they will transfer the assets to the government. But as for the build, uh, operate and transfer, the build, operate and transfer is not in a lease agreement format. Okay, so it's only that the private sector will finance and operate that asset or that project for a specific period, and then they will transfer the ownership to the government. Okay,
Okay, thank you, sir.
it's okay. So private finance initiatives also have some disadvantages, which may include the fact that uh, there is risk in involving private sector, because a private sector, if you give projects to private sector, they may fail you know, to lift up to expectation on that particular project, and eventually the risk will still eventually finally fall on the public sector organization, on the government to eventually, because some of these projects that are given to private sector are essential services that government needs to do. And if they give the responsibility to a private sector entity to do it, if those ones fail to do it, you know that it will still eventually come back to government to do it. They must, because they have to do it. Government just have to do what they have to do. So the risk of those projects is still on the government. The debt costs as well. It increases the debt of government sometimes, because if they use initiatives that involves government having to pay them back, right? Government have to pay them back for the projects, for the execution of the project, is one of the ways that increases the debt of government. And then administration in doing all those private finance initiatives, they have to involve so many other costs that ordinarily if they are not involving private sector, they will not incur some of those costs, like maybe experts, advisors, lawyers, consultants that they need to bring into the fold of the project. So those are some of the disadvantages of having the private finance initiatives. Then another issue, okay, another issue that we also need to know about is privatization and commercialization. Privatization is when there is economic restructuring that has to do with transferring ownership of a government-owned entity, to a private owned entity. That is an entity that is owned by government before. You are now transferring it, or maybe full ownership or part ownership of it, to private sector entities. That is what's known as privatization. That is a publicly owned assets being transferred to private entities. But commercialization, for commercialization, it is still government that is owning that asset, but the way of operating it will only change to a more commercialized manner. That is, uh, the, the they will now operate it as a profit-making entity. Okay, they will operate it to make more profit. You know that ordinarily public enterprises are not expected to make profit. They are not established to make profits. But when they are commercialized, what it means is that they will be operating on a more commercial with a more commercial objective. That is to make money. They will now be operating to make money. Okay, so they will target to make profit as well, even if the profit is not so much. They will now target to make profit rather than just providing essential services to the people before. Okay, so we can have different forms of this privatization and commercialization. We can have it full privatization, that is when governments remove their hand from a particular entity or a particular enterprises, and then they sell everything to private sector. That is a full privatization. Okay, like the way the government sold the what's the name of our power company? NEPA. Where they sold NEPA completely to even though government still maintain a share in it, but government is only maintaining equity shares, not that government is still having hand in operating of those companies. Then we can have partial privatization. So when government sell part of its equity, so they partly privatize. So they are still government is still owning parts, private sector owns parts of certain government entities. So that's a partial privatization. The same thing with commercialization. Government can fully commercialize a, a particular government enterprises. That is, um, the government will stop subvention to that entity. So that means that entity will now be allowed to charge public for the services that they provide or for the goods that they produce. So in that case, government will no longer be giving subvention. You know that when we talk about government business, government enterprises, public enterprises and corporations and parastatal, their major source of revenue comes from government subvention. But when these enterprises are commercialized fully, that means government will stop giving them subvention. So they will be the one to generate their own revenue through the charges they place on the services that they offer. So commercialization can also be partial as well, where they will still be enjoying support from government. The organization will still be enjoying financial support from government. At the same time, they will still be operating on a commercial scale, on a more commercial scale, so to make profits. So these privatizations are usually because of certain reasons. So the reason might be when there is lack of accountability by management of government enterprises, when government is not running that organization very well in an accountable manner, they're not giving proper reports. So government can decide that let's just commercialize or let's just privatize this entity. So if there is lack of managerial autonomy and flexibility in pricing and investment decisions, so if that is the organization needs to be making some decisions to be able to operate efficiently, but because they are under government, they need to be getting certain approval, certain authorization. So government can say, okay, to avoid all of this, let's just privatize these entities so that they can be able to operate independently with autonomy and provide efficient service to the people. Then when there is lack of competitive remuneration or adequate incentives to attract good managers, so if there are some entities that they are operating, they are important to government, but because they are government entities, the remuneration of their staff and their managers are already determined by law. Meanwhile, the service they are rendering requires that those people are well paid, better than what they are paying them. So in a situation like that, government can say, okay, if we privatize them, then they will be able to determine their own remuneration on their own. And so they will be able to attract good hands to go into that kind of agency to be able to operate more efficiently. Then when there's political interference in the operation of an entity, government can decide to privatize it so that the interference from politicians and all of that will reduce. Then challenges of privatization, that is, it will widen inequality as eventually it is the rich that will benefit from privatization, because when government says they want to privatize a particular entity, it's not the poor that will have money to invest in that. When they wanted to privatize NEPA, it is still the rich people that are able to afford the money to buy the distribution companies and the generation companies and all of that. So it is the rich that will eventually. So these people, when they now buy it, they will still be charging the public for the services they are providing, and then they will be getting more. They will be getting richer and richer. Then um, there's possibility of not valuing the company properly before privatization. This especially happened around 2007, I guess, around 2007 in Nigeria, when we did a lot of privatization in Nigeria. The federal government did a lot of privatization of so many federal government owned investments, and there were some there were quite a lot of accusations against the government then, against the committee that was given that responsibility then, that they sold some of these national investments at ridiculous prices to friends of people in government. So these are things that can the challenges that come with privatization. When you look at an entity that is supposed to worth billions of dollars and being sold to somebody for maybe a few million naira, it's, it's very ridiculous. Then also private managers may also charge high prices for the product. So when government privatize as well, they may end up charging the people for the services exorbitantly, so which may lead to exploitation, and that is what we are experiencing in the power sector now, when they are now charging exorbitantly on the people, and the people cannot even breathe. It's electricity bill again. Then, due to downturn of the economy, there is inadequate loanable funds and limited capital funds and financial resources available to generality of private sector entities to acquire and maintain public enterprises. Okay, so sometimes government even want to privatize, but the private sector entities, the private sector investors may not have access to enough fund to be able to even invest in government enterprises that government want to privatize. So private privatization also have its benefits as well. Apart from the challenges, it has its benefits. At least it leaves some burden away from government. Government can be free to focus more on some other items. It encourages new investments as well. Um, when public enterprises are privatized, they become tax-paying entities as well. You know that government agencies do not pay tax. I mean, cannot ask Ministry of Works to come and pay tax, or Ministry of Environment. But if government have an entity, we have an enterprise and then they privatize it or they commercialize it to start making profits. Especially if they privatize. So what it means is that that company too will now become a taxpayer. Instead of collecting taxpayers' money before, they will now become a taxpayer as well. And they will need to pay tax to government. So it's one of the benefits of privatization. So instead of government spending money to it, they will be the one to be giving money to government. Um, Floating of shares in the capital market can also stimulate growth in the capital market. So if, for example, if government says today that they want to privatize NNPC, you know that many people want to buy shares in NNPC. So that situation will stimulate growth in the capital markets because people will begin to buy shares. People will begin to sell one share of one company so that they can buy shares of NNPC. You know, it will invigorate some energy into the capital markets. So those are the benefits that can happen as a result of privatization. Okay, so I'll leave this for us to go and read up later on the Bureau of Public Enterprises. Bureau of Public Enterprises is the agency of government that is given the responsibility of uh, privatizing government enterprises. Okay, it was established in 1993, and their responsibility is to look at, I mean, to handle government privatization and commercialization activities. Okay, so they operate based on governance by the National Council on Privatization. There's another body known as the National Council on Privatization, and that body is the one that that governs the Bureau of Public Enterprises. Okay, so their functions is there for us to just read up and have a good grasp of what these organizations are. So that is where we'll be drawing the curtains for tonight. Um, do we have anybody with question? Okay.
Tapis, I hope the note will be sent to us.
Yes, it will be sent.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so if there's no question,
Sir, there is question.
okay.
All these companies that the government are privatizing and the one that they are changing to commercial, if they want to acquire it back, can they still buy it back?
And the government buy it back. Well,
Yes.
it depends on the agreements of the privatization in the first place. So, for example, if it is a partial privatization, that is, government sell part of it and then they still maintain part of it. Now, if government is holding the larger share, you know that what it means is that government will still be the controlling entity. They will still they have the controlling interest in that organization. So, for example, if government privatize one enterprise now and they hold maybe 70% or 60% shares and they sell 40. So in that case, you know that that kind of organization is government that will still be controlling it. In that case, they may not even need to buy back. Whatever they want to happen in that organization, they can effect any change. But if they are not the controlling, if they don't hold the controlling interests, in that case, it is another entity that is controlling. So it may be difficult for them to buy it back, except they can be able to convince those other entities that hold the controlling share to sell their own interest to the government. So it's a matter of negotiation and persuasion. It's not something that government can force them to collect back from them. No. So because it's guided by law on how the privatization process is guided by law, and once they are privatized, so because some people have like this is a very good question. Some people have said that government should collect back the electricity companies, for example, from the Ibadan distribution, the Keja distribution, and all of those people. But it's not something that's that easy to do because you are privatized. It's something like they buy something, they bought something from government and they paid, and government collected money. So you cannot say this thing that you have bought, oh, I'm not selling again, bring it back. It's not that easy. It has to go through uh, some negotiation and persuasion if they decide to now sell it. And that will be if government is now ready to pay the price that they will be ready to sell. Okay, so that's how that works. Except you now have a situation of a state of emergency in that sector. Maybe now that if the electricity companies, for example, they are not performing at all. Let's say they are not even performing at all. Everything is muddled up. They are not providing electricity and everything, and the legislature can come up to the rescue and make some resolutions, some pronouncement, and in that case, in that situation, they know that even if those people go to court, they cannot win because they have failed in their responsibilities as well.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Do we have any other question? So if there's none, maybe we can close the class for tonight. Okay, I can see Mr. Tope has already is with us. So that will be the end of the class for tonight. Thank you for joining in.
Good night, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.